Hello everyone. So in this video I wanted to show you my process for reading and annotating occult books. And we're going to talk about, I have a whole system that I have perfected for annotating books. So I'm going to show you the system and we're going to work on this as an example. This book here, Grimoires, A History of Magic Books. What really inspired this video is that I recently filmed another video showcasing this book here where I had the tabs on the book. And a lot of people were asking me, what do you even tab in your books? I've also had a lot of questions in the comments just asking me in general how to read and really absorb the information that you're reading, because some of these occult books get really philosophical and it can be really difficult for some people to retain that information. So in this video, I'm going to show you some tips and tricks for how to actually retain the information that you're reading and what exactly it is that you want to be annotating. So one of the first things that I would recommend before we even get into annotating, as far as just remembering and being able to articulate what it is that you are reading, definitely pick up some sort of notebook or some sort of journal that is your designated notebook for when you are reading occult books. And after every chapter that you finish, let's say you're starting this book for the first time, you're finishing the first chapter, before you even step into chapter 2, I would recommend stopping, putting the book down, and going to journal for a little while. And you basically just want to journal anything that came up for you, anything that was interesting or thought-provoking. Try to summarize what you read in chapter 1 as best as possible. And I encourage you not to look at the book during this journaling session, because this is really going to force you to put things in your own words. And that's really how you can retain the information, is when you are able to take your knowledge from this book and write it out as if you are teaching or instructing someone else and you're putting it into your own words. And you don't necessarily have to have all the information correct. You don't have to remember everything. This is just to get you started with the process of being able to articulate the things that you're reading. So after your journaling session, then you can go back if you want to chapter 1 to see how accurate you were, and then you can kind of cross-reference what you learned in your own words versus how it was actually written in the book. Obviously, this is very time-consuming if you're going to do this after every single chapter in a book. So you can make this as easy or as in-depth as you want it to be. You can really do an extensive journaling process, or just after you finish a chapter, open your journal, write out maybe a paragraph or two, and then move on to the second chapter. But that is my first recommendation before we even get into annotating. Journaling really does help you retain that information. So let's get into annotating. I actually just got some new sticky notes and tabs, which I'm really excited about. So here are my new tabs. I actually don't like my old tabs. I think these are really ugly and hideous. I don't want to use those anymore. So I got these new tabs. I'm really excited about it. I got some new sticky notes as well. I like the parchment looking sticky notes. That's just an aesthetic thing for me. Get whatever sticky notes you want. I don't care. If you like these, I'll link them in the description box, but I don't really care where you get your Post-its. I'm just showing you what I have. So we are going to crack these open because I'm going to show you the annotating process. So I personally cannot mark up my books. I cannot take a highlighter and a pen to my books. I wish I could. If you can do that, great. You can just use highlighters and pens and you don't have to use this whole tab system that I'm going to show you. You can just annotate inside the book. But I personally, it literally crushes my soul to write in my books. So this is the system I have developed with that. Just know that you can use highlighters and pens and do basically the same thing. So the first thing that I annotate, and I don't do all of these for every single book, so I'm going to explain that a little bit later into this video, but the first thing that I annotate is something that requires further research that is needed or wanted. So this basically encompasses questions that I have for things that I don't fully understand, or maybe there were some interesting things that I just want to research more on. Fact checks also fall into this category, because obviously what anybody writes we cannot just take at face value, especially in the occult or spiritual communities. It's really important to fact check even the author. Some people think that, you know, if an author writes a book, that everything in that book must be true, and that's unfortunately just not the case. So it is important to fact check the author, make sure things actually happened, or make sure that they happened during the right time frame that they said it did. All of those things are really important important. So if there's something that is more like a question mark for you, where further research is needed or wanted, that is the first thing that I'm going to be annotating. Also, sometimes in books you'll see like a recommended reading list at the end of the chapter or the end of the book. There will be a list of other books that the author has suggested for you to read up on. I would also bookmark that as further research needed, because I want to look into those other sources and see what those other sources have to say. So it's just a nice little bookmark for that recommended reading list. But yeah, first category here is just question marks. The second category here is things that I disagree with. And I like to mark these because I like my beliefs being challenged. I really like being opened up to new paradigms of thought, new perspectives, and if I'm reading something that I don't quite disagree with, I want to sit with it a little bit. You know, I want to marinate on it and really figure out, why do I disagree with this? Is this something that I can maybe open my mind to a little bit more? Or is this something where the author and I just simply don't agree? In which case, that's fine. I can still read the rest of the book and hopefully absorb some other knowledge. But I like to tab these because these are things that I want to sit with and really come back to and try to open my mind a little bit more with. The next one that I like to annotate is things that make me think. Also, this is going to be really crooked, so I apologize, you guys. I'm like sitting to the side of the camera right now, so these are definitely going to be crooked, but things that make me think. This category is more about things that I want to expand upon in my reading journal. These can be things that are more philosophical or things that I think would be excellent journal prompts. Maybe something that makes you dive a little bit deep into shadow work while you're reading it. So those are things that I definitely enjoy going back to and journaling about later on. The next one is pretty straightforward, spells and rituals. These are things that I want to bookmark for later on, so when I'm flipping through the book, I can look for this color of tab and I can immediately go back to, oh yeah, that was that spell that I wanted to do, or there was that ritual, etc. So having a color coded specifically for certain spells or rituals you want to try is really nice. And then there's also a category for personal gnosis. This is not a category that I do for every single book. Again, I'm going to talk about which categories I do for which books, but I like to have a tab for personal gnosis because I find it's really important to identify what is fact and what is personal gnosis when you're reading someone's book. If you're reading a more academic book, you probably don't really need this category, but if you're reading something that is based on someone's personal experience, it's always good to identify, is this fact or is this opinion? Are they stating their personal opinion as fact? Because that can be really problematic. And there's nothing wrong with personal gnosis, and in fact, I actually really love personal gnosis. I've mentioned in my videos before that I feel like if you're not bringing any personal gnosis to the table, then you're not saying anything new and you're just regurgitating the same old stuff from classic occult books. So I really like personal gnosis. However, I have a problem when people try to pass off their personal gnosis as fact. And if you want more information on like what personal gnosis is and how to spot it and all that stuff, I have a video on critical thinking in occult spaces. So I'll put that video, I'll link it below in the description box, and it goes way more into this topic right here. This next category is key ideas. So this is really important to tab. I tab this in pretty much every single book that I annotate because I want to identify, what is the author actually trying to say? What is the point that they're trying to make? What is the take home? So if I'm reading through a passage and I find one or two sentences that really just kind of sum up what the author is getting at, I will tab them. Or maybe there's just like a whole section on one page that you want to tab. But this is helpful because when you go back through your occult books later on, let's say some time has passed and you have not read this book in, let's say, 6 months or so, and you want to go back through the book again, you can look for this specific color and go through all of the key ideas of the book. So that is so helpful to have on your books for reference later on and while journaling. If you're going to journal afterwards, it's helpful to be able to flip back to this specific color and look for the key ideas in the book. So this last one here is influences and derivatives. Again, I don't use this one for every single book. Oh my gosh, my tab is not. This is so messy, you guys. So influences and derivatives is really about, where did this information come from? If I am reading an occult book and it looks like there is, let's say, a heavy Wiccan influence, and I'm noticing a lot of Wiccan elements in what they're writing, I will tab that and put a little sticky note with my thoughts on that, that there is an influence, this material that I'm reading is influenced from Wicca. Or maybe I can find that it derives from Neoplatonism or Hermeticism or, you know, the Golden Dawn. Whatever it is that I'm reading, if I'm noticing that there are some patterns or some some key elements where this author's work is really a derivative of ceremonial magic or Wicca or whatever it is, that is really helpful in me understanding the author's perspective and where they're writing from, because obviously we're all going to have very different perspectives on things, and it just helps to be able to see the occult world in a much broader view as well. This one's probably a lot harder for people to do who are beginners, because you're not necessarily going to know what was influenced from what, you're not going to know what derives from what. So this, I would say, is more for like intermediate advanced practitioners in the occult community that have like a better grasp on occult history in general. So you don't necessarily need to do this. I just like to do it. Now this is really, really important to note. So our short-term memory can really only store between 5 and 9 things at one time. And there was actually a study done, researchers at University of Oregon, what they found was the human brain has a limit on the number of thoughts that we can entertain at one time. And the limit for most individuals is 4. So I usually try to narrow this down to 4 things per book. That way it's not so ridiculously difficult when I'm actually reading the book, because when I'm reading a book, I don't want to have to think of how many, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There's 7 things here. I don't want to be thinking of 7 different things to annotate in a book. That is way too much for me to keep track of at one time. So I usually try to narrow it down to 4 things max. You can have less than that. You can have more than that. Sometimes I'll only have 3. It's really up to you. But I would encourage you not to go overboard and make a giant long list of all these things you're annotating, because that can just become way too difficult to manage. So for example, looking at this Grimoires book, right, going back to the history of magic books, this is a more academic text and it's more based on history. So I'm probably not going to need to annotate personal gnosis, because hopefully a book like this won't have a ton of personal gnosis in it if it's a more academic book. I also don't think I need the tab things I disagree with, because what am I going to disagree with this in here? This book is not an opinion piece by any means. What am I going to do? Disagree with history? That's ridiculous. So I probably won't annotate things that I disagree with in a book like this, but I will definitely be annotating where further research is needed, where I need to fact check things, annotating things that I don't quite understand that I need to research more into the future. I probably will annotate things that make me think. That's something I'll want to do for a book like this. I probably won't need spells and ritual bookmarks in this history book, but I will definitely need key ideas and then influences and derivatives. So these 4 things are going to really be what I annotate in this type of book. But let's say I'm reading more of like an opinion-based book. This is just what I would consider an opinion-based book. By the way, I love Kellyanne Maddox. Love her so much. She has a YouTube channel. Please go check her out. But this book varies greatly from the Grimoire books, because this one is a history book. This one's a lot more academic, whereas this one has a lot of personal opinion in it, which I love. And there may be points in a book like this where there is more personal gnosis. And so that's where I'm going to want to be highlighting things like personal gnosis. Do I disagree with this, or do I agree with this? How does this book make me feel, and how does it make me change, or maybe not change, my magical practice? And this book is also one where I would probably bookmark spells and rituals that I want to try later. So you can kind of see like the 2 very different ways of annotating books, just depending on what category they fall in. Okay, so let's have a quick little annotating session so you can kind of see this in action and see what it looks like with the small tabs and the big sticky notes. So let's open the book. Let's say, perfect, we are right here. And let's say I have come across a passage here that is a key idea. This is a key moment of what the author is trying to make. And I want to be able to tab it for future reference. So what I would do is I would tab the page, of course, right where I found the key ideas. And then I would take my sticky notes, and on here I would write in my own words what that key idea is. So I've just read the key idea in here. Now I'm going to write it in my own words on this sticky note so I can refer back to it later. And then when I'm done with that, I will take the sticky note and I will put the sticky side touching the sentence. And I do this for a very specific reason. So let's say the sentence is up here, and I want to be able to refer back to this specific sentence right here. So when I have this tab, actually I would technically move this tab up just a teensy bit. Now I know that this key idea is right here. It starts right at this sentence. But let's say you have the key idea that started down here. You probably don't want to like have the Post-it sticking out towards the bottom. So what you'd want to do instead is take the sticky side and touch the sentence with it. So now I know sticky side is down here. So this is the sentence I'm referring to, not this. I'm not referring to this sentence up here. I'm referring to this down here because it's touching the sticky side. And that's just a personal thing that I have, so I can make sure that I'm keeping track of what sentence I'm doing, especially when I have a page that has so many notes on it and so many sticky notes. It's helpful to know which sentence it is that I'm referring to when I'm tabbing all these different things. So this is an example if I had multiple different notes on here. I've got one note up here for further research needed, and then I've explained, you know, what the thought process was behind that, what I need to research. Is it a fact check? Is it something I'm just interested in that I need to look at in the future, etc.? And the sticky side is here, so I know that it's referring to this right here. And now here we have a key idea that refers to this tab here. The sticky side is on the bottom, so I know that the key idea is in this sentence right here. I don't tend to go too heavy on my tabs and my sticky notes for, like, for example, when I was showing the bones fall in a spiral, I actually don't have a ton of tabs in something like this. But for something that is really academic, you know, something that's a little bit more history based like this, I'm actually just about to go through the process of annotating. I've already read this book, but I'm about to go through the process of annotating it because we're reading it for book club. Little shameless plug, by the way. We're doing a book club, so if you want to sign up for it, I'll leave it in the description box. But I'm about to go through and annotate this heavily because I haven't gotten the chance to do that yet. When I do a deep read, that is when I go in and I heavily annotate the book. If there are exercises, I do all the exercises, and it becomes a bit like a habit too. I think the first maybe book or two, no, I wouldn't even say that. I would say the first half of the first book that you do this system with, it's probably going to feel clunky and awkward. You're going to feel like, oh my gosh, I can't remember what I'm annotating and what I'm doing. But after that, it becomes like second nature. And then you're able to absorb all the information that you're actually reading and not just reading a book, finishing it, and then going, what the hell did I just read? So I definitely recommend that you give this system a try. If you are someone that has an annotating system, I would love to know what you annotate in your occult books. Let's get a little thread going so people can get some additional advice on this subject that I may have not covered. Anyways, thank you all so much for watching. I'll see you in a video soon. Bye everyone.